I do have an amazing guest and a terrific show it's going to be. First of all, our guest today will be Will Turner, and he's not a stroke survivor, but I asked him if he could share his remarkable journey over the last 2 years, and he agreed to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Will. So please welcome Will. Good morning, Will.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. It's funny. I keep thinking, boy, has it been, I don't know, 9 years that I went to your class and graduated from Farm Credit University.
Wow. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but
I think so, yeah, because coming up in, well, maybe, I think so, because 10 years I had my stroke coming up in October.
okay.
So it'll be, yeah. Now, I don't know if you see the comment there.
Not without my glasses on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Good. Deb is just saying good morning.
Good morning.
So a lot of people come in and salute. She's a caregiver.
Nice.
She's saying aloha.
Aloha.
Yeah. So you've had quite the journey over the last 2 years, 2018 and 19.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought you'd be perfect, even though you're not a stroke survivor, that you could share your journey, because how you push your limits. Because I kept thinking, wow, you really inspired me. Not just sit around. I mean, I don't sit around, but I work on my therapy and all that. But you're really pushing me to do better than I think I can.
Good.
So I don't know how you want to start. Introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, and we can go from there.
Okay. Will Turner. I live in Richmond, Virginia. And 2 years ago, I turned 60 years old. And I decided before I turned 60 that I wanted a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal for when I turned 60. And I'm an endurance athlete. And so I decided I was going to do 6 Ironman triathlons the year I turned 60. And an Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a 26.2 mile marathon. I thought that would be huge.
Yeah.
Actually, I do some coaching with other athletes, and I had some local athletes that were competing in a triathlon in town. And so I went out to cheer them on and support them. And I ran into a friend of mine. This was about 3 years before I turned 60. And I had just come up with the idea shortly before that I wanted to do 6 Ironmans the year I turned 60. Before that, I'd done an Ironman at a time, one a year type of thing. And so
Right.
I thought was going to be huge. And so in the conversation I was having with my friend, she said, do you have any big race plans coming up? And I thought, well, let me share with her my exciting news. And I said, I'm thinking about doing 6 Ironmans when I turn 60 in a few years. And she immediately, very matter-of-factly said, oh, like Sam. And Sam's a local triathlete who had turned 60 a couple years before and had done 6 Ironmans. And I mean, not to take anything away from his accomplishment, because I don't know any other 60-year-olds who have done 6 Ironmans in a year.
Right.
But all of a sudden, it just took the wind out of my sails. I was like, oh, this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal that I thought I had is not so big and hairy and audacious after all. And so I went back to the drawing board and did a bunch of mental gymnastics, but eventually ended up on doing 60 Ironmans the year I turned 60.
Wow.
So that was 2018. And then I continued the journey for a couple different reasons. In 2019, we did 45 more. So over the last 2 years, I've done 105 Ironmans, which has never been done before.
Right.
So quite the exciting and this life-changing journey along the way.
Yeah, and then I remember the story your daughter said, because the first year, 2018, you did 60 of them, 60
Right.
Ironmans, and 44 was the world record at that time.
Right. So there's not 60 actual races, Ironman races in the world in a year. So what I needed to do was do a combination of actual races and what I call on your own races, where
Right.
I follow all the race rules, but I set up my own course and that sort of thing. So the first actual race in the U.S. in the year was the year of 2018 was a race down in Naples, Florida, and it happened to be on January 6th. So I decided that would be my inaugural, first race
Right.
of my 60. So the race was on January 6th. I finished the race, and a couple hours later, on January 7th, I turned 60 years old. So,
Yeah.
I talked to my daughter after that. My daughter's grown and she lives in Charlotte, and she said, "Dad, that one doesn't count. You weren't 60 when you did that race." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It counts."
Yeah, exactly.
And so I ended up doing the 60, counting that one, and then before I turned 61, I ended up doing a 61st one, just so I could shut her up so she could let up for the rest of my life. So throughout the year, I would talk to her on the phone. She's not on Facebook, so she wasn't necessarily following my posts and that sort of thing.
Right.
I'd finished, number 41 in, somewhere in California, and she'd say, "Dad, what number are you on?" I'd say 41, and she'd say 40. So that kind of went on all year long. So I'm like, I can't, do this forever. So I'm just gonna shut her up and do my 61st one. So she'll say
Right.
60 when I turn 60. So
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing story.
I'll be accountable, right?
Yes, exactly. I completely understand that, though. But I just thought it'd be great that you talk to all our stroke survivors, caregivers, because a lot of stroke survivors get really kind of in a rut. They feel like, they can't push themselves. And I thought you said you weren't really a big athlete in high school.
Yeah.
And how'd you push yourself?
I was very late to, I did little league sports, but in high school and college, I didn't play any sports. I wasn't what I would consider a big athlete. I was probably more of a nerd and very academic, and that's
Good.
I got into triathlon about 25 years ago. Did my first triathlon, and I was still doing shorter distance stuff. I eventually worked my way into marathons, and then when I was turning 50, I decided I wanted a BHAG. I wanted that big, hairy, audacious goal for turning 50. So
Right.
I decided at that point to do my first Ironman. So I thought that was going to be a huge goal for me, and it was at the time.
Right.
And that kind of started me on the path that kind of led me, 10 years later to do what I just finished doing. But I learned along the way, endurance sports, I wasn't very good at it. And I found it really hard. And that's really what kept me in it, because
Right.
I wanted to kind of break the code. I wanted to figure out, how can I get better? So there was a lot of failing and falling down along the way, and picking myself back up and saying, what did I just learn from that failure? What can I do better? How can I, adjust or change something with my physical training or my mental, training, so that I can get stronger and better along the way. So it's definitely not this natural given talent. It's more of the stubborn persistence of just wanting to push myself to get better at something I'm not very good at.
Yeah, but I'm sure you're amazed. And the great thing is, because I have your book here,
Yeah.
and it's incredible, because you went through 40 states, and you actually went through, is it 4 or 3 provinces in Canada?
Provinces in Canada, right?
Wow. And you went through,
Over the journey, I was in a little teardrop camper, traveling all around the country. Literally over a 2-year period, traveled over 150,000 miles, including driving all the way up to Alaska.
okay.
Denali National Park. A lot of the races we did were in national parks, and so just the journey itself, just driving all over the U.S. and Canada, was amazing in and of itself. And then you tack on an Ironman every 4 to 6 days, or whatever it happened to be. And
Yeah.
it was quite the adventure.
There's so Salute is saying, I've done the last portion of the Camino de Santiago de Salute, why are you doing this to me? Compostela in 2013. Huh. Okay. Um, Thank you. But so well, lost my train of thought here. Okay, so I pulled up some of the pictures because you actually wrote a book, Journey to 100,
Right.
and I picked some pictures out there, and I could see you running there.
Yeah, I'm running. That's in Arches National Park. Um, yeah, near Moab. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I was running in yeah, just stunning um, scenery. And of
Yeah.
course, my partner through all this was Chris DiStefano, and I called him my Uber Sherpa, but he's also a photographer extraordinaire. So um, I know I told you this, Jerry, but we were not planning to do a coffee table book as part of our journey. But I would, after each race, I would post the race report. And then Chris would take pictures of me while I was out there running and biking and swimming. And I would post pictures along with the race report. And people started telling us along the way, oh, you've got to do a coffee table book. These pictures are amazing. And they really are. Um,
They're unbelievable. And I have just a couple. And this one here, look, that's like a journey to where are you going? That's beautiful.
yeah, that's in Death Valley. So, yeah, the landscape there is just kind of otherworldly, but just having those long stretches of road, people along the way would call me Forrest Gump because I was always like running down some road and kept on going
Right.
and going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's how do you convince yourself to, I mean, it's probably no phone, no nothing. When you're running, you got to think. And it
Yeah.
probably helped you.
People would I had a friend of mine, because I don't wear earbuds, I don't listen to music or podcasts or anything while I'm running or biking or swimming. Um, most actual races don't allow that because of,
Wow.
if you're, it's dangerous. If you've got earbuds in, you can't hear the traffic or that sort of stuff. So I don't train with that either, just because if I can't race with that, I don't want to train with that. And certainly I could have on my own, but I find that there's a lot of um, just there's a lot of peace, there's a lot of solitude, there's a lot of just thinking and processing time that goes on when I'm out there on my own for hours and hours and hours at a time. Um,
Yeah.
really, I found was in the journey, particularly, just quite a gift. A gift to be alone in your thoughts, alone with nature. Um, I somebody asked me, "What do you think about all day long?" And the reality is, I think of a lot of different things, but one part of my day or multiple parts of my day would always be thinking in a space of gratitude, that I'm thankful to be doing what I'm doing. I was thankful for the people that were supporting me along the way, whether they be with me or virtually just, sending me, their love and prayers and those sorts
Right.
of things. So it was just a great time for reflection and gratitude and kind of feeling grace in that moment. So, um, and the other part that I didn't expect that was really beautiful about the experience was it when you're doing an Ironman, it's basically anywhere from a 13 to a 17-hour day,
Right.
depending on the course and the conditions and that sort of thing. But that means I was totally unplugged. I wasn't looking at my smartphone. I wasn't on my laptop. I was unplugged from the world and news and all the chaos and destruction that's out there. And it was peaceful. I mean, just to have that break from all the chatter that goes on a daily basis that we're exposed to, and just to be,
Right.
and by the time I finished, it was late at night, and so, I'm running out in the middle of Death Valley, and I'm under this canopy of stars, and there's no one within miles of me. So to have those kind of moments over and over again in these amazing places was truly, a great gift that I just
That,
really
it,
appreciated.
It must have been a gift. But,
Yeah.
like Salute says, definitely a mindset to keep improving and finishing.
Yeah. Yeah. In a long race like that, there's lots of things that happen in the course of a day. I always think of it in terms of peaks and valleys.
Right?
You have these high moments where you're feeling great and you're feeling strong and all those sorts of things, and then you have these low moments where you're taking a deep dive, and there's always going to be. Actually, when I did my first Ironman, I had a coach, and the coach told me, it's a long day. Any way you slice it, it's a long day out there racing, and you're going to have ups and downs. And so that understanding that on the front end, knowing that there are going to be valleys and anticipating those really
Right.
helped me because, oftentimes you get in these valleys, it's easy to kind of get in that negative mindset and go, this is too hard. I want to quit, all those sorts of things. But when you can expect it, when you know that it's going to come, when it gets there, it doesn't throw you for a loop. It doesn't freak you out. I always looked at it as like welcoming an old friend, maybe not a friend that I like so much, but it's like, oh, here you are. I've been expecting you. And, in those moments in an Ironman for me, those moments could be where I'm just feeling totally exhausted. I'm feeling beat up by maybe the conditions, the wind or the heat or rain or whatever, I might be battling through. I might be
Right.
physically and mentally just spent. And I, there's nothing sweet in those moments. They hurt and you want to give up. You want to
Yes.
stop. But I've learned, and this is one of the reasons why I've stayed with endurance sports as long as I have, is that I've kind of rebranded those moments as I call them sweet spots. And there's nothing actually sweet in that moment, but when you get through it, if you keep pushing, if you keep moving one foot in front of the other, and you get to the other side and you get to the finish line or you get to a place where you're feeling better, um, it's like, to me, it's like drinking this golden elixir because it gives you more confidence, it gives you more resilience, it makes you, just realize that you have more to give than you thought you could. And in those moments when I'm racing, I don't know if those valleys are going to last 5 minutes or 5 hours. But what I do know is if I keep moving, I'm going to get out of it. I'm going to get a second wind. I'm going to keep, I'm going to get to a place where I'm feeling better. I'm going to start going back up again. And so, I would constantly have to remind myself that, this is one of those tough spots. And I learned to kind of self-identify with the tough spots. Like, Will, this is why you do this. This is why you do endurance sports because you want to get on the other side of this.
Right.
So it's a testing ground, and you test yourself enough, and you get stronger and stronger, along the way. I am a big fan. I don't know if you remember this from the class you took with me. Angela Duckworth, who wrote the book Grit. You remember
Right.
that at all? She's
Familiar, but
she's like the preeminent expert on grit in the country, and grit is a combination of passion and perseverance, and it's pushing through. And she talks about perseverance not just in the moment, but also for the duration. And in her research, and she's done extensive research with with athletes, with students, with business people, with all different walks of life. And she finds that the people that succeed and excel in their area are the people with the most grit. It's not the people with the most talent. It's not the people that are the most gifted.
right.
It's not the fastest. It's the people that have the most grit. And it's tapping into that grit, that keeps you, gives you that ability to keep pushing. When, I tell people that, even though I broke the world record, I have no special athletic gifts at all. I think if I've got any superpower, it's grit. It's
Wow.
being able to just push through when people would give up. And I know that people in your community, in the stroke community, have to summon a lot of grit every day just to do simple things sometimes.
Right. Right.
And it's just tapping into that and then doing it. And then the next day, it becomes a little easier and a little easier. And sometimes the progress is really slow, and sometimes we fall down.
Right.
but it's the ability to get back up and kind of dust ourselves off and not give up, to keep pushing and knowing that, if we keep pushing, we're going to get to a better place.
That's so true. I mean, that's why you on the show relates to stroke survivors, because a lot of, well, as you know, they fall down a lot, and
Yeah.
they get to the point where, I don't know if I should go anymore with this, but like Mike Peters, he's from South Wales, United Kingdom, says, do you visualize before you do them so it's not a surprise?
I'm not. A lot of people, a lot of endurance athletes, a lot of athletes in general do a lot of visualization. I do a little bit. I'm not real good at it. So I definitely think about it, and I think less visually than I do probably by words. So I'll think through my day before the day actually happens.
Right.
So there is a level of visualization that goes on.
Wow. Because let's see, there's another, before
I'll back up just for a second.
Sure.
I think maybe some of your folks can relate to this too. There's often fear kind of going into something that's unknown, and I certainly embracing that fear and confronting that fear is part of the journey too.
Right.
This ties into the visualization part. Early on in the journey, probably when I first started, I was averaging an Ironman every 6 days.
That's amazing.
And my partner through all this, Chris, he was noticing like the day before the race, I was a little shorter, with my temperament. I was
Really?
in a little bit of a funk, and I knew I was having race nerves, and a lot of athletes, right before the race, they get all nervous and anxious, and there might be some fear there. And so I had, when he said that, it was like, yeah, you're right. And I had to do some self-awareness there. It's like, why am I this way? Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I not, feeling, just relaxed? And what I realized is that I was being fearful of what could go wrong the next day, because in an Ironman, I might be swimming in some lake that I don't know what lives in there. I've actually over the Ironman, I've swum with seals and alligators and stingrays and sharks, and those were not necessarily fun experiences. There was some fear there, but I would think, and then I would think on the bike what might go wrong. So
Wow.
so I had to stop and say, what am I really afraid of? And the reality was that at that point, with all the training and the races I'd done for the last 10 years and what had been doing in the journey, there was very little that I was going to face that I hadn't faced already, and
Yeah.
I had to tell myself, Will, you've already done the work. You've proven that you can do this. So there's nothing, whatever pops up, you're going to take it as it is and figure out a way to get over it, around it, through it, whatever you need to do to keep pushing through. And once I just accepted that, the fear went away, and I could be much more relaxed and just be much more in the moment and not thinking about what can go wrong. Because that whole negative, self-talking, that chatter can just go crazy if you let it. And you gotta let it go.
It, you know, you hit the nail right on the head. I don't, whatever I'm saying. I feel like that all the time. If we're going to go somewhere, I'm thinking, okay, I've got to make sure that I go this way. If there's a lot of people, I can't get bumped into. So I'm thinking ahead, like what will go wrong. I do the same thing. So you, as an extreme athlete, is thinking the same thing, but you're not anymore, though.
Not anymore. What?
That you're thinking like what you just said about thinking what could go wrong.
Myself, I think, I don't know as if it's possible, at least for me, to get rid of just having negative thoughts. But what I have been able to do is as soon as I get a negative thought, I recognize, I'm self-aware enough to go, okay, that's not good. How do I address this? And there's a researcher out of Durham University in England. His name is Charles Fernyhough, and he's done a lot of research on negative self-talk and negative bias and that sort of thing. And it's interesting that there's actually research that tells us that humans in general have a negative bias. They tend to hold on to the negative more than they hold on to the positive, and that impacts our behavior and impacts what we think. And so one of his strategies for dealing with the negative self-talk is to, as soon as you recognize the negativity that's coming on in your head, is to challenge it and actually have a conversation with it, so that you don't let this train wreck of a negative thought just kind of go unimpeded. And
right.
I'll tell you a quick little story. I was getting into Lake Koocanusa, which is it straddles northwest Montana and British Columbia, Canada. The lake is long enough that it's in part of Canada, part of the US. And I was doing one of my Ironmans there in early June of 2018. And I had a wetsuit, but the wetsuit was sleeveless. So
I've seen it.
Some wetsuits have full sleeves. So the full sleeve ones are just, protect you more from the cold. So anyway, I get in the water, and it's northern Montana at the Canada border. It's early June. The water is freezing. I get in the water in my wetsuit, and as soon as I start swimming for my 2.4 miles to start my Ironman for that day, the negative thought went in my head is like, oh my God, this water is so cold. How am I going to make it 2.4 miles?
Right.
And immediately I'm going, okay, Will, you can't go down that path, because if you do, you're never going to, I'm going to like talk my way out of this and quit long before I get to the 2.4 miles. So immediately what I did was, I wanted to acknowledge that it was cold, but I didn't want to play into the fear of it's too cold. So I'm like, yes, it's cold, but it's refreshing. And how often do you get a chance to swim in a beautiful lake like this, and you've got the whole lake to yourself because nobody else is swimming in it because it was so freaking cold. Very early in the morning, because that's when I started Ironman. So anyway, I'm swimming the whole time and doing my best to keep a positive mental attitude and not let the negativity kind of go anywhere after that initial onslaught. I literally get to the end, and I'm starting to stand up to walk out of the water. I'm about probably 10 feet from the shoreline at this point. And Chris is standing on the edge, and he's often taking pictures. Well, he happened to be taking a video of me getting out of the water. And he thought he was just going to take a picture of me or a video of me kind of going out of the water and saying something to the camera, to the people that are following the journey, like, hey, finish the swim. Now I'm off to the bike. But when I stood up out of the water, I was shaking uncontrollably. And then I fell back in the water. Then I tried to get up, and I was shaking again. And the whole time I'm walking, and I'm stiff, and I look kind of dazed and crazed and all this stuff.
Right.
I was borderline hypothermic, had hypothermia. So I was really in that moment just struggling, and I'm not sure how I made it, but I know that I made it because I willed myself to do that, and I didn't let that negative chatter take over.
The grit.
I ended up having to go to the car and like cut on the heat for like 20 minutes just to get my body temperature up to the point where then I could get on my bike and then continue, the rest of my Ironman. But
wow, 112 miles then.
Yeah, then the 112 miles, then you run a marathon after that. So it's a long.
Now, Yvonne is asking, and she, I hope I don't get this wrong, Yvonne. She's from Greece. Okay. She says, does your guest know Iron Samba?
I don't know.
Don't know that. Let's see. And Melissa's saying, wow, Will, you are so inspiring. Thanks, Jerry, for letting us know Mr. Turner's amazing accomplishments.
Well, thank you. I'm humbled to be here.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. And like Mike Peters says, I learned to bring down an imaginary drone to rebel negative people and situations. But yeah, I'm glad you said that about the negative. I mean, there should no excuse for me not willing to push myself.
You know, and sometimes we get the negative stuff from other people too, right? Um,
Yes.
I had, you know, when I started sharing with people before I was, you know, after I told my friend that I was doing 6 and then I went back to the drawing board, I waited another, this was like 3 years before I turned 60. So I waited till probably about 6 to 9 months before I was actually going to do the 60 at 60 to really start sharing it with people. And at first I shared it with my athletic friends, my running friends, my triathlon
Right.
friends, because I thought they would be really supportive. I thought they'd be like, Will, that's awesome. You know, this is, you know, I can't believe it, but this is great.
Right.
All of them, except for one, all of them said, Will, you're crazy. You can't do this. You're going to hurt yourself. You're too old. I mean, all the reasons why it couldn't happen. And it was, you know, at first it was like, you know, I was disappointed because it's like, you know, I thought these people would be supporting me. I thought they'd be my, you know, they're my friends.
Right.
And then, you know, it dawned on me after a little reflection that they were speaking, even though they were speaking to me, they were speaking of their own limits, not mine. You know, and it wasn't their goal, it was mine, you know, and nobody needed to believe that it was possible but me. And so, you
Yes.
know, if they were expressing limits that, you know, told them that it wasn't possible, they weren't the ones that were going to do all the work to prepare for it. They weren't the ones that was going to do the physical and mental training for, you know, a couple years to get ready for it. They didn't know what I'd gone through to get where I was.
Right.
I didn't expect them to be on the same page with me,
Right.
you know, and I think sometimes too that the other part of that is when you have those naysayers, you just want to show them that they're wrong, you know. Like, you know, you might not think I can do this, but I may fail. I may not get there where I want to go, but
Right.
I'm going to give it everything I've got. I'm going to, you know, tap into whatever grit I've got. And if I fall short, it's not going to be from a lack of trying and perseverance. It's going to be just because I can't get it done. But the likelihood is that if I keep pushing and I keep getting up, I'm going to be able to, I'm going to be able to get there. So,
Yeah. And in your book, there's so many beautiful pictures in there. I was overwhelmed in reading it, and I looking at it this morning. And it is a, if everybody has not seen it, it is a coffee table book right here. I can't hold right that well.
you know,
Journey to 100.
and I'll turn. I've got one in front of me too. I'll turn to one of the inside cover pages. I think the inside under our journey to 100 here, it says an epic adventure of grace, grit, and gratitude. And you know, those are three of the recurring lessons and themes through that journey. Is you know, the grace and the grit and the gratitude, and just really, you know, having that open heart and open mind to embrace those along the way. And so even though it's about my Ironman journey, I think there are a lot of, you know, what I've been told by people who bought the book is that, you know, there's lessons in there for everybody. You know, you don't have to be an athlete to be able to appreciate grace or grit or gratitude and just pushing through big obstacles along the way.
Yeah, and as again, as you're not a stroke theraper, but doing this, you be on the show, you have a lot of the experiences that we go through.
Yeah.
We can learn from you, and the grit and pushing, even if you don't reach that point, but you tried. There's no lack of not trying. I mean, you worked your tail off, and we've been told. I mean, about a year after my stroke, I was told I plateaued.
Mm.
It's almost like your friend, or not friends, but your other athletes said, you know what, you're crazy. You're not going to do it.
Right. Right.
That proved to me I'm going to show them.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, just like in your community, you know, you see somebody that does do it, and you know, when you see that, it's like if they can do it, I know that it can be done. You know,
Right.
and people would tell me I'm too old, I can't do this. I've got a lot in the athletic world. I've got a lot of older athletes who I look up to as mentors and role models and inspiring me. I often tell this story. There's a gentleman. His name is Lou Hollander, and he was the first athlete over 80 years old that completed the Kona Ironman Championship in Hawaii. And so he's competing in this race, and he still has to meet all the cutoffs that every other athlete does there. So there's a cutoff for the swim as far as time, 2 hours and 20 minutes. There's a cutoff for the bike, and there's a cutoff for the race. Everybody has to complete the race in 17 hours. So
Wow.
Lou was competing against people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, 60s, and 70s, and he was 82, and he did it. And
Wow.
I recently read a story about him during this pandemic. And during the pandemic, he's 90 years old. He lives in Oregon, and he still is going out there. He's not racing Ironmans anymore, but he's doing triathlons on his own at a sprint and Olympic distance level.
Wow.
And interesting, he gets interviewed a lot because of his accomplishments, but people often ask him questions, and one of the things he says he does is that he always, every single day when he's training, he pushes himself to an anaerobic level. So anaerobic is like the step beyond aerobic. Aerobic is something you do for a long period of time. Anaerobic is when you're taxing all your muscles, and your oxygen is being depleted very quickly, and you feel like you don't have enough air. And it's like when you're sprinting really hard or going up a big hill or something, you're taxing yourself at that critical level, and you can't sustain that more than a couple minutes. But he's
Right.
at 80 some years old, and now he's 90. He's still going out and not just doing an easy jog or a walk. He's pushing himself to the point where he's physically, just exhausted, at least
Wow.
until he recovers from that. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, is that I think oftentimes we give up, or we kind of fall back to our comfort zone. We might do something, we might push, we might walk, or we might run, but are we pushing ourselves as much as we can? Are we going to that point of, exhaustion, or that point where you can't give anything more? And that's a part of grit as well, is just kind of not settling into something that, I know I can do this, and it's good for us when we do any type of exercise, right?
Yes.
How often are we really pushing ourselves to that next level where it starts to hurt? Because it's easy to back off a little bit and say, that I don't feel like doing that today, or that's a little too hard. But it's the hard stuff that changes us. The hard stuff is what makes us better. It makes us more resilient. And so if we don't bump against that hard stuff and keep pushing, then we don't make that progress. So people often ask me, why did I do 105 Ironmans? I say it was hard. And the hard stuff is what changes you, and I wanted it to be something that would change me.
Yeah, and it certainly did, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah, and I love your affirmations and the quotes that are in the book. If your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Yeah. I found that quote when I was doing my first Ironman when I was turning 50, and I used it. I like little sticky notes, so I have a little sticky note with the quote on it in front of me, so I can look at it, throughout the day. But I would use that quote as I was training, for my first Ironman, and then when I was decided to do the 60. I used that quote as a barometer. If your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. And that scared the crap out of me.
Right.
Can that even be done? And so now when I come against a big goal or a big dream, or to have this crazy idea, I'll say, does that scare me? And if it scares me, I start paying attention. It's like, okay, don't get away from this. Let's dig in a little bit more and see if this is something that I really need to give some time to.
Yeah, and you've also a little shout out here from Serena. She's from Nova Scotia, Canada, and you did 4 Ironmans in Canada, or
how many?
Or something provinces.
I did. I traveled through 3 provinces: Alberta, British Columbia, and drawing a blank now. So I made it through. I did one in Banff, and along if you Banff and Jasper are national parks in the provinces in Canada and in Alberta. Absolutely just breathtaking locations. I also did Ironman in Whistler and
Wow.
Timberton and north of Whistler, but just stunning. I think Banff was probably the most of all the ones I did. I did some in some of the most amazing places all over, and I think that gets the prize for most beautiful.
Right. And this one,
That one's on Big Sur, the coastline on
yep.
California near Big Sur. That one I did over about 9,000 feet of climbing on the bike, and if you know,
It looks like it.
it's a lot of climbing. So literally at near the very end, I mean, I was going all the way up the coast, and climbing these hillsides along the coast, and I knew that I've got a Garmin, a watch on my bike that I can track how many miles I go to get to the 112 miles. And I knew I was coming close to being at the finish of the bike. And it was near Nepenthe, which is a famous restaurant on the Big Sur coast, right?
Yep.
You're probably familiar with. So
Very.
I've been, on the coast 100 times, but when you're riding a bike or running, it's different than when you're in a car, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, the elevation and just the climbing just is really taxing. And so I was coming around these bends, in the road, and I'm thinking, I know I'm close. I know I'm close. And I'd go around a bend and it'd be another climb, and I hit another switchback and it'd be another climb. And I kept thinking, I've got to be close. I got to be close. I got to be close. And every time it was another, like I'd make it around the turn and there'd be another climb. And this went on for like 9 times. And each time I am like at the end of my 112 miles and I'm completely spent. And I need to push till I get there. And it's taking everything out of me that I possibly have at this point. I get to the top of the hill, the last one, and Chris is waiting for me on the side of the road, a little pull out. I pull off the road and literally don't have the energy to stand up, and I fall over on the side of the road, and these cars are like slowing down and like, are you okay? And Chris is like, oh, he's fine, keep on going.
Yeah.
Like kicking me, he's like, get up, you got more to do, you got to run a marathon now.
Well, oh yeah, so the marathon's after the
after the it's swim, bike, run in that order. But yeah, in that moment I was just like, I'd given everything I got to get up to the final hill, and I was just kind of spent. But then I had to get back up and continue the rest of the race.
Did you ever, because you went through so many national parks, was it 40 states, and I can't remember how many national parks. We have a Zoom on Wednesday with all our stroke survivors, and we have on a Zoom thing, so we have a bunch of people on there, and that's what people are asking me. I'm cheating because I had the book right in front of me, and Paul says, okay, who can name 7 national parks? So some people typing in, I got the book and I'm going through everyone, because you went through a bunch of them, and they're, gosh, I hope everybody can have the chance to buy these. This is absolutely this book.
Yeah, I mean, you showed a picture of Arches National Park, but Death Valley, Yosemite, Glacier National Park, Grand Teton National Park. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on and on. It's just some of the most beautiful scenery out there. Here's I don't know if you can see this. This is in Alaska.
Yeah, just went through
Denali National Park up in Alaska. Just some pretty amazing locations, and Chris's photography just does it justice.
Yes, beautiful. And I have the little crawler going there, liveyourbold.com. So they can get on your website and they actually can order your book through there. Is that
Yeah.
good? I think that's what
Yep.
I did.
What's that?
I think that's how I bought it.
Yeah, yeah. Actually the only place you can buy it is on the website, the Live Your Bold website. Um, so just so your people on the call know, when I started the journey, I was obviously there was this huge physical and mental challenge that I set for myself, but I also wanted to make it more than just about me going around the country doing Ironman. So I started what I call Live Your Bold, and Jerry knows because of this is how we connected years and years ago. But
Yes.
background from my career is training and development work. And so I started thinking about what can I do with this, pair with this journey so that I can serve other people. And I thought about raising money for a charity, but there was no charity. I've supported a lot in the past, but there was no charity that seemed like a perfect match for what I was doing. And so I
Right.
thought, let me use the gifts that I have. And so I created Live Your Bold resources, a starter kit. I wanted to help people step out of their own comfort zones and
Yes.
do things that would stretch them. I would I would go and talk to school groups, and talk to kids, and I would talk to adults as well. But anything I could do along the journey to spread that Live Your Bold message was something that I did as part of the journey to give back, and that to me was probably more rewarding than any of the Ironmans I did, which was, just seeing and getting the feedback of how you have an impact on somebody else. What you do or say has that ripple effect that sometimes you never know about. But to have some of the feedback along the way, I mean, I had a woman who was not a stroke victim, but she had some physical issues. She's about my age. She's about 60 years old, and she could she could walk, but not very well. And she had found comfort and ease in having a motorized little scooter that got her around. And so that's what she had kind of fallen into using most of the time.
Sure.
And she said because of what she saw I was doing, she decided she was going to go for a walk, a long walk. She was going to push herself. She was going to do something that was hard. And she ended up not walking 1 mile, but walking 2 miles. And she said that was the longest she's walked in decades. And to me, that's
Yeah.
that makes it all worthwhile. If and I had lots of stories like that. Of people just kind of stepping out of their comfort zones and doing something that they probably wouldn't have, but they were inspired along the way and decided to push themselves and um, you know, that makes it all worth
Worthwhile there.
everything I went through. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's we all these stroke survivors, everybody in our community, same thing. But if we can inspire one person, if it changes one person, it really, I feel better. And just Mike Peters also said it's okay to cry when there's too much on your mind. The clouds rain too when things get heavy. And he was talking about being in this pandemic. It's easy to just sit around and just do nothing.
Yeah.
So how do we push ourselves?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw it, Jerry. I know we're friends on Facebook. I just wrote a blog post about, it was 7 mental strategies that I picked up in my Ironman journey that you can use during the pandemic to help you kind of push through. One of them is that peaks and valley thing that I told you about, and
Right.
kind of the negative chatter. But there's some other ideas there as well. I can forward it to you if you want to forward it to any of your folks as well.
Oh, that'd be terrific. That'd be terrific, and I appreciate that. So because I know we're down to really kind of close to the end here. So, are there any advice that you could give? Because it's so inspiring. Your story is just. I'm glad you were able to come on, but it really is so inspiring, and not to quit, not to give up.
Yeah. One piece of advice, I do a lot of speaking. And one thing I usually end with when I'm speaking to a group is I tell them that I want to give them a challenge, and I want them to um, embrace a goal that is so bold that they have to grow into the person that can achieve it. Because, we don't know what our limits are, right? And
Right.
until we push those boundaries, until we set something so big and so bold that we have to change to get there, we're going to fall short of our potential there. So, I have absolutely zero regrets for the journey that I went on. And, even though there were plenty of people that told me I shouldn't do it, I couldn't do it. I think whenever we do something, whenever we push ourselves, there are no regrets there. So just finding ways to continually challenge ourselves, whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, spiritually, whatever it is, we all have so much untapped potential. We just have to find a way to get to it.
Exactly. That's a great way to, and I always say life is a gift, make it count. But anyway, some of the people here now, I'm just, Lori's, awesome show. There's so many, but you'll be able to see the show afterwards on Facebook. But thank you everybody in our community for being here. Appreciate the comments. There's so many. And I apologize. I didn't bring up all the comments. So, and Salud just said no regrets. So, if you can hang on for just a second, and I'll just say goodbye. And they're still coming. And thank you for sharing your wonderful podcast. They're still coming. But Will, thank you so much. I'm so glad. We reached out. I reached out to you. It's probably during the Ironman journey.
Yeah.
But perfect.
I'm very thankful to be on here, and thankful for all the people watching today. Thank you for their kind comments and words.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So amazing. Thank you for sharing.
I said this before, but I'm humbled by, you guys do things that take heroic courage every day. And, I think you guys know that, but if you don't, you need to own it, because, it really is inspiring to people to me, to so many people. So
right.
What you're doing.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate you. So, and it is great for and the caregivers here, like Salud, she's a caregiver to her husband, and it's like they had the stroke too.
Oh, absolutely. My mom was caregiver to my dad with dementia and Alzheimer's, and I mean, caregivers. Wow, I just have so much respect for them.
Yeah. I've seen and talked to so many people. As soon as they had the stroke, their spouse left them after 30-something years, or it's just some of the stories are tragic. But you, as inspiring all of our stroke survivors, I mean, what you accomplished, people told you couldn't, and now what you did. So everybody should be taking this into account. So awesome, Will. Appreciate it so much.
My pleasure, Jerry. Thank you.